Hello, good morning, and welcome. This is the follow-on to Frog 20. This is our very first in our series about how to better engage with parents. You may have noticed that right now my video has disappeared, so I'm shortly moving rooms. So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody so much for taking the time out of their school day today to join us here. And remember, you don't need to be a Frog school to be part of this. As you found in the last event, that we're just the facilitators and we're here to share stories from across the globe. So as I say, my name is Lucy. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Frog. And I just want to run through a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit about the agenda before we get going. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a chat facility there, which some of you are already using. And we also have a box there that says questions. Now, those questions are available for you if you have a specific question that you want to ask anybody. And some of our team will be there to help on that. Now, the agenda today, we're starting off with a Q&A session between myself and Andy McDonald-Bowyer from Davidson High School. Following that, we'll be really happy to welcome Sophie Bailey again. Now, some of you that attended the last event will have seen Sophie. Sophie is the founder of the EdTech podcast, and she's also previously been involved with VET, so some of you may know her from time there. Some schools that will be joining us with Sophie's session around parental engagement are Lois Pugh from Brighton College in Singapore. Lois is the deputy head there. Martin Soulsby from North Lake School in Cumbria, and also Tom Parsons, the assistant head from Winston Churchill High School. So I am going to just try one more time to get my video to access. It's not working. So Andy, you're going to have to talk to a flashing Lucy until I can get somebody to come in and access my camera to try and get it working. But first of all, let me welcome very much to the stage Andy McDonald-Bowyer from Davidson High School. And Andy, thank you again for taking the time out today. I know it's been a busy time since September, but I wondered if, first of all, thank you again, and can you tell us a little bit about your school, please?
Yeah, morning, Lucy, and good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I can't see you at the moment. Yeah, my school is a girls' school. It's a school in the maintained sector in West Sussex, and we're based in Worthing in the south coast of England. We've got about 1,300 students on roll, and we're a 7 through to 11 school.
Okay, so I know you're down in the southwest, and I know you haven't had any massive issues at the moment, but one thing you were telling me about was the change from before the summer holidays and how you're communicating with parents to what happened after those holidays.
Yeah, we learned quite a lot over the period of lockdown from March through to the summer, and we have implemented two sort of major strands of technology in order to try to have a kind of straightforward and simple communication. Since I last spoke with you, we've had a sizable increase in positive cases, and only in this last week we've had to send home 3 year groups while we're doing contact tracing. So it's really beginning to test the kind of systems that we've had in place. Back in March, we were very concerned that we wanted to put in place something that was going to be effective and take into account the sort of home circumstances in which our plans landed. And so we didn't opt for a sort of business as usual normal timetable. We didn't opt for a video streaming arrangement like many other schools, because we were concerned that on the basis of our evidence, we had teachers at home who were trying to manage their their own circumstances with small children and the learning for those children in their own classes, as well as trying to sort of teach our children. We were very mindful of that. But our evidence was also telling us that on the surface, it seemed as though students were quite well stocked with different devices. And in fact, when we started to scratch away at that, we found that that definitely was not the case, that there were many circumstances where the device that they had was not adequate for learning, and that very often that they were sharing devices with other siblings and parents and step parents across houses and so on. So it was much more complicated than we kind of first assumed. And given that the first lockdown arrived without any kind of warning, we didn't actually have a plan. And we kind of said to our staff, communicate in the best way that you can. It's really important that we keep the channels of communication going. But make sure that there is communication there. Don't just assume that if you send something off on one of the digital platforms that it's going to arrive. And so we kind of got over that initial hiatus, and people were relatively satisfied with what was going on until we discovered that the level of sort of marking and assessment of progress and assessment of engagement was beginning to reveal quite sort of sizable gaps, and that parents were saying to us, I'm sure that teachers are setting the work. I can see that that's happening on Frog, but there isn't any assessment going on. We are not being informed about progress, and my daughter is becoming demotivated as a consequence. So this was the sort of getting towards kind of June time, and we then started to do a fairly kind of detailed analysis of what means were students using to understand feedback, and what means were teachers using. And we came to the conclusion, in fact, that there were 14 separate technologies that teachers were using in order to communicate with students.
Wow.
Which is quite substantial. And some of it was fairly old school in terms of phoning. But you can imagine the way in which this was arriving in homes where children were sharing devices. There was a sort of expectation from us, implicitly so, that they could access these technologies. So Frog was definitely our biggest means of communicating marking, but we were emailing, we were using Office documents. There were a whole range of sort of different ways that kind of suited individual subjects. So we kind of came to the conclusion at the end of the summer term that this was not doing anybody any favors at all, and that we would then try to focus during the final 2 weeks on Frog and Frog alone. I'm not sure entirely how successful that was, but it made us come back in September with a clear picture of pretty much what we needed to do. Given the fact that we almost certainly knew that schools were coming back full time by then, and that the virus wasn't going away. So, we kind of envisaged the scenario that's happening now, where you've got, classes that don't have, at times, very many students in them. So our plan was really to embrace two technologies, one of which was a video streaming lesson technology, which we have taken on board, and the other one was to use Frog Markbook and Frog Feedback as the sole means of setting student work and assessing student work. And we had 2 teacher training days, in service days, at the beginning of the term. So we devoted those 2 days for staff training only on both of those technologies. And we then subsequently had live training days where we've used the technologies for every lesson of every day to really teach the students to be able to use them and understand and appreciate that was the only place in which they were going to submit work for marking, view the feedback that was given on the marking, and then be able to respond to it wherever necessary. And that seems to have landed very well indeed. It means that we can keep everything really tight and everything is known. So we've got our analytics that are telling us the level of engagement. We've got our staff voice that's giving us some feedback around how it's working out through Frog. But because Frog feedback is such a beautifully simple and really effective tool, it's got everything in it that colleagues would want. It's been incredibly favorably received. It means that we don't have to touch any paper unnecessarily within the classroom, and once we have trained the students to get over the difficulty of taking photographs of work and uploading that through Frog apps, then it's all worked quite well.
I think, Andy, there's a couple of things in there that you've mentioned. So number one that I've taken out of there is that you said you had 14 different methods of feedback. Yeah. Number two, it sounds very much like this change of course of action was really driven by parents getting confused about what kind of feedback.
Very much so. Yeah.
And thirdly is a standardized approach. And really, how did you gauge what level of technical knowledge parents, students, teachers would be able to cope with?
I think we came to the conclusion that we really had to kind of start from scratch in trying to build this up. I think that any assumptions that we made around the level of engagement, and not just engagement, but the level of sort of cognitive processing and gaps in understanding, was much lower than we thought, particularly amongst the Key Stage 3 students. I imagine, I mean, the evidence is with the current year 11, probably about 50% of whom came back in during the summer term. Their understanding of the technologies has made the level of assessment feedback and general kind of management of the current situation much easier, and their parents as well. And we work quite hard to make them aware of the notifications processes in Frog that they could use in order to get a handle on all of that. The year 7 going into 8s into 9s has proven a little bit more of a process where we really have gone back to basics and made no assumptions and had to start from the bottom upwards. And so that's kind of involved us having a couple of webinars for parents on how to use Frog. It's involved us creating digital video, which we have put onto our streaming site for parents on exactly where they can find the information that teachers are giving on the work that students are submitting.
Okay, so you're talking there about dealing with isolated students and giving parents a clear path of how do I find out how is my child doing, which is a big question. And I know that that's the question that a lot of people here will be thinking, how do I tell parents and answer their question, how is my child doing? And secondly, where do I find out that information and how do I interpret it? So how do you communicate to parents how to find this?
I think this goes back to our assessed curriculum, and we were sort of early advocates, I believe, of Frog Progress, and we found that during lockdown that the pattern of submitting work and assessing work was so patchy that we couldn't, with our hands on our hearts, judge that any progress was being made against KPIs. We felt that was a really dangerous thing to do, given that lots of students were really struggling to get access to broadband, to devices, internet technology. We didn't want to sort of exacerbate the kind of social divides that were out there. But since September, we have become quite clear around reinforcing our assessed curriculum. So We have got our KPIs now that have been in place for 5 years. Over the last term, it was my job to stack them through full of exemplar standards and full of learning locker resources and extension resources. And so this has been, it's a kind of system there that is fully supportive of remote learning. Now, in terms of how parents know about progress, we've always been very clear that we will report that the My Learning app, which is been enhanced over the summer term as part of the Earhart release, I think. That's actually looking really, really good, because parents can see a quick summary of the judgments that teachers are making as they're landing. So with Frog Progress, we require them to make 2 judgments by December, and the judgments are simply, I think I've said many times at conferences, that they are simply the student has provided sufficient evidence to show that they understand the work, and so we would judge it achieved, or if they haven't, then we would judge not achieved yet, and on the odd occasion where they are demonstrating a higher level of thinking, deeper level of understanding, we would judge that as exceeded. So that's available to parents and students all the time, and I think one of the benefits of keeping everything in Frog is that it's the natural and first place that parents go to find out that kind of information. So we've put out videos and communications that are saying the teachers are assessing. Some of you may well find that there is some information in some subjects at this stage, but you will, by the time we reach the end of December, you'll have 2 KPI judgments in all subjects right across the piece. Yeah. And then after that, we follow that with our KPI boost phase, which is a sort of dedicated catch-up phase. That's the plan anyway. Hopefully we can still do that with the numbers that we've got, but that is our plan.
So I think that's really important. Now, obviously, many people here with multiple solutions out there, and that could be something that they're using to assess against the curriculum, something they're using for setting homework, something they're using to communicate with parents. But what you're saying, you put everything together under one roof. Now, one other question I have for you in that instance, therefore, when you are delivering this blended learning approach and you are delivering your lessons to the children at home, how do you therefore identify those isolated students or those particularly vulnerable students that may or may not be engaging with the work? What do you do, and could you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, I mean, we've been charged by our local authority to have a COVID recovery strategy plan for students who haven't engaged and have got gaps in their learning. So we were fairly clear about the levels of engagement, first of all, and we used Frog Analytics as a major part of that. We could see quite clearly students who had not submitted work through Frog where they were required to, or through those students who hadn't even looked through assignments. So the level of engagement was quite useful as a first sort of point of defining who the group was. We then started to do once they returned to school, we then started to do some baseline assessment in large subjects and smaller type assessment in those subjects that, I mean core subjects where students are, where everybody receives a core subject. But in the smaller curriculum subjects, we did a series of tests and so on to try to identify where the gaps were. It's been really, really hard. Because there have been some really interesting things that have confounded this. So when we started to look at gap and engagement against reading scores, we found that the students who had sort of high levels of disengagement very often had higher reading scores than they had when they were with us in September last year. And we don't really know why this is, but we suspect it's because they have been at home talking to their parents much more, and who have been talking about schoolwork and things like this. They've had a higher level of conversation, and there is a link between the quality of the conversation and the reading score. So trying to unpick it has been particularly difficult. It's not an axiomatic process where no engagement, therefore don't know. When a student is attested for gaps and they're not showing evidence, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know. But with our plan, the point at which we've got to at the moment is to create a list of target individuals, and we are planning on offering a tutored support that is a wraparound tutored support. So we are looking at the students and their families and really trying to not just deliver kind of chunks of content in subjects, but to try to get to what it is that enables the students to access the learning and understanding, that kind of level of individual and personalized support that can be offered through our school-based program to start with. And that's where we're going to go, and we're looking particularly at year 8 and 9, and we've got a lot of data on year 7s coming through, a lot of data that we would take anyway at the beginning of the year. So that's our kind of focus for gaps and catch up. In terms of the technologies on gaps and catch up, that's really important, because very often some of these students simply don't know how to access homework on Frog. They don't know how to look at the My Learning on Frog. They don't know how to look at the kind of assignments lists and calendar and how to plan it through. And it's the planning of the support with those sorts of things. This is what you've got, and this is where you could do it, and this is how I help you interpret the resources, those sorts of things. That's how we're going to go forward with it.
Andy, thank you so much. There's one last thing that I'd really like to hear from you before you go. Now, this is something that's really interesting, and we've talked about parental engagement and keeping it simple and the whole school approach, etc., and one standardized approach. But one thing you talked to me about a couple of weeks ago was, how do you basically transition from the incoming students that, for example, they've not used your platform? So your platform could be any platform, and we're not saying this is Frog specific, but you have new students joining your schools, and they can't necessarily come for an open day. They can't necessarily walk around.
Yeah.
Yes, they could go online and get a little bit of a video walkthrough of what the school's like, but actually, how do you prepare them for coming in the new year 7 when actually their bubble might suddenly go off again? And I know you've done something on this.
Yeah, well, we imagined a horrendous scenario with our year 7s coming through to us, having been out of education largely for about 3 months and trying to get their heads around the digital technologies that we were going to throw at them from the off, to expect them to become experts at managing all the stuff that Frog has got in it. And so what I thought I would do was to try to get to a position really where they were quite familiar with it at the end of the summer term and also over the summer holidays. So I constructed a Frog site that largely had homework as the only app on it, and the rest of it was just a series of Frog games that I borrowed from Frog Play around a good number of sort of foundation key stage 2 subjects, and a few other bits and pieces that I brought in from elsewhere. But the aim was that we wanted the students, we set up the Frog accounts beforehand. We've still stuck with their login details. And the aim really was to try to ensure that they had logged in. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
I'm back.
You're back. Brilliant. They'd actually logged in and had a go at the games and so on, and had a look at homework. And we made that available to both the students and the parents. Obviously, the students we couldn't give the parents' accounts out just yet. And that made a real difference. Once again, Frog Analytics was telling me that nearly all of them had logged in and had a go, and we had some nice little competitions being generated. But the truth of it is, it meant that when they arrived, we weren't going through that process of having to show them Frog, having to get them set up, having to deal with all the password kind of issues, all of those sort of things that are going to make it more difficult, given that we didn't know which students were coming in and what we might have to do if students tested positive and so on. So it was something that I would definitely do again.
That's just fantastic. And are there any takeaways or any hints and tips that you just want to share with anybody here? Any of those challenges you had along the way?
Keep it simple. First of all, make sure that you're quite clear that all of your staff are doing this in one way and one way only, and that they're not doing other things as well. That's a really big, getting the buy-in from staff and spending the time right at the outset to say, this is the way that we're going to do this, and building up a sort of rational argument for doing so is really important. You also get some things that you learn during the course of the process, and one of the things that I learned the other day, which I think was significant, and I'm not sure where it's going to go, was that our geography team were creating assignments in Markbook and then asking the students to upload it. They applied some success criteria to the assignment, and they then were marking against the success criteria. And of course, they realized that these made fantastic exemplars for the KPIs. So they could take screenshots of this and then push it into the exemplars, which then became a really strong, invaluable teaching resource for the rest of the cohort and for parents and students, to do remotely. So that was a bit of a find. And at the moment, I think only geography are doing it, but I'm sure at some point when we all recover from panicking about positive test cases, we're gonna start pushing that out, because that seems like a really, really good thing.
That sounds fantastic. Hopefully you'll come and tell us a little bit more about that in the future. So hopefully you can stay around a little bit. Obviously the chat is going, seeing it going quite busy, and thank you again for talking to a blank screen. It must be like talking into a black hole, so I do apologize for that, but I now have a camera. But thank you again for taking the time to join us, Andy. Thank you very much for sharing all that information. So we'll see you again soon. Thank you. So we have a couple of other parts to today. So Sophie is going to be hosting a panel discussion very shortly. Then we're going to have a quick pause just for 5 minutes, and then our very own Graham will be joining us, and George Bligh from Greenshaw High School, and they will be having a little look at their Frog platform. Now, as I said before, you did not have to be a Frog school to take part in today. So the things that they will be showing are things that you can take back to your own school. It's just ideas and anecdotes. It happens to be facilitated on the platform. So I can see that Sophie has joined us. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi, lovely to see you. So I can also see that Martin Salisbury from North Lakes has joined us. John Parsons has also joined us. Now, I know that Lois from Brighton College in Singapore was having a few issues in the school, so she may suddenly pop up if she's managed to deal with it. But she's here. Hi, Lois. Right, hi. I'm going to take myself off screen and hand over to Sophie now. Okay, see you soon.
Well, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Andy, as well. I really enjoyed that chat, and it was very honest and open, and I'm sure everyone has learnt a bunch from it. We've got 40 minutes to talk about the importance of fostering positive parent engagement. So I'm really looking forward to asking our panel of guests some questions, and some will be general and some specific to both their schools in the UK and Singapore as well. But just to kick off, perhaps each of you could give a sort of 1 minute or less introduction to who you are and what you do within your own school context as well. John, would you like to go first?
Hello. Well, I work at a school called Winston Churchill School. My responsibility is for teaching and learning across the whole school, online learning, and also our what you would now call character education, although we wouldn't call it that. So that's my broad responsibility. We've been with Frog for I don't even know, it's so long, 10 years at least, I would have thought.
Fantastic. And Lewis, thank you for joining. I know you've had a busy time, so thank you for making it.
No worries. So I'm currently the deputy head at Brighton College, Singapore. So we're a founding school this year. We opened in August for the first time. So my responsibility is both the pastoral and academic sides of the school. So prior to coming here, I was actually head of a school in Korea, and we had Frog there. And I've then brought it over now to Brighton College.
Great, thank you. And finally, Martin.
I am teaching junior school in the north of England, in Cumbria, and I'm on the leadership team and responsible for online learning across the school as well.
And I'm really pleased that you have that clock in the background, Martin. There's no excuse if I go over time. That's really helpful. So first question, I think it's always useful to sort of start at the beginning. Why is parental engagement important, and why is it especially important now in these current circumstances? So anyone like to kick off?
I can start if you're happy.
Thank you, John.
Well, I think schools always really value parental engagement anyway, because it's like a triangular relationship. And therefore, if you've only got a relationship with the students, often the parents feel like school's a black hole that they don't know anything about. I think pretty much every school since the beginning of time have been trying to work out how to solve that problem. And none more so than in the last 6 to 8 months. The whole process we've just been through has been so full of learning and experimenting with new things that I would think we found where we've been really successful, what we've been able to do is provide not just the resources for students, but also the support for parents to make good decisions about how they're operating learning at home, and then provide what we think is really important feedback to the students that they can then work through with their children and say, look, you are doing well, and keep encouraging them.
And I thought it was really interesting in Andy's point about, starting from scratch, because, I think sometimes the conversation with assessment is very internal focused, and suddenly parents are engaging with different forms of assessment. I'm just thinking about, for example, reading. You've got different levels, you've got different colours, and sometimes you're not actually sure as a parent even, what this means. So I almost think, and I'd love to hear from you all on this experience, whether sometimes it's about taking it right back, explaining right from the beginning, and can you ever make it too simple, or any lessons on that side of things as well?
I think we have to go right back and make it really simple. I think we need to remember that all of a sudden parents became educators overnight at the start of lockdown, and many schools became a lifeline for parents as well. And we also had to help parents become experts in new technologies and how to use new technologies, as well as students having to use new technologies as well, because we were all put in this position really fast. So it's evolved over time with our students and our parents, and we've all had to learn together. A week's gone by, we've had to change things. A month's gone by, we've changed things again. And to enable us to do that, we've had to have parents on side. We've had to have parents taking that journey with us. And it's been small steps to be in the position that we're at now, ready for bubbles closing, children going home, and a new style of home learning happening if we need to.
And did you find, Lois, I'll just see you as well, did you find that your communications increased over that time as well?
Yeah, I think for us it's quite interesting. It's a bit of a unique situation that our school only opened in August. So we got a brand new parent body, all children, many of whom we had never met because they were all kind of admitted to the school where we couldn't meet the children face to face. And, you know, they'd all had very, very different experiences of online learning. Many experiences we you know, didn't fully understand because they've all been at different schools. We haven't got a single set of children who come from the same school. So they've all had very, very different experiences, some internationally, some in Singapore. So for us, it was about kind of coming up with a very simple communication tool that we could actually start to build our relationship with our parents, because we started from nothing, totally from scratch. So we were looking at something that was simple, that everybody could use, but it also was going to be a really positive experience for them, because as has been mentioned before, some people were coming in, you know, really down in the dumps about the last kind of 3-4 months that they'd kind of been living through with their children. So yeah, so it was an interesting way to start a school for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for all of you as well, so were there any other major changes of how you went about parental engagement sort of pre and post COVID, or as we continue to live with it?
We changed during the process. We sort of we're constantly evaluating the process, obviously, but we had like watershed moments where we changed what we were doing. So during COVID, we switched all our communications through Frog, because we knew that we had to simplify what we were doing, but enabling parents to engage with that was obviously going to be tricky, because if you're communicating via an app that you've already got, the emails, and then through Frog, it becomes very difficult. So we went through what can only be described as quite painful process of restructuring that communication to make it more effective. And in all honesty, I'll say that we've been much more successful with that as time's gone on, and as we relaunched this year. Maybe I'll talk about it a bit later, but we gone directly for Frog as our only means of communication, and all our efforts have been focused on making sure that parents know how to use it. I'll elaborate that later, but I'll let somebody else answer.
Okay, and well, maybe we should jump on that now, though. If you're
well, it's fine. So my feelings about having this conversation are, you know, what could you take away from it? And for me, one of the things that we've done is we've set home learning tasks for students that involve their parents doing things on the app and such like. Now, I'm sure lots of people have thought of that, but if you haven't thought of it, works really well. So you can set the whole of year 7 and a task where they've got to take a photo of their parent doing something or other, or they've got to have their parents sign a form that says they've successfully accessed so-and-so on the school app, and then the child will upload a photo of it to the homework. So we've really got the whole mechanism of using Frog effectively with our year 7s, for example, as a way of introducing them to the home learning thing from scratch. So all our year 7s come in, they've had a series of tasks like that have been organised by a couple of people in the school who are highly motivated to make that successful.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other pre or post COVID changes that you'd like to share before I move on?
Yeah, I can I add in what kind of we've done. So we are a primary school, actually, and we've only got up to year 4 at the moment. So we're using Frog for less of the, I suppose, homework, home learning aspect. We're just set up for if we need to go into lockdown again, then we will have a system that works, and we're training the children on that. But what we've been using ours for is all of our children have an e-portfolio. So obviously with very young children, it's really important that the parents are able to kind of see what's going on every day and kind of feel like they're taking part in the lessons that are happening, and really have a firm understanding, because some of our little ones, you know, don't go home and say exactly what may have happened during the day. So all of our children kind of have been totally kind of trained in how they kind of get onto the app. They take photos of their learning, and that's kind of all uploaded onto an e-portfolio, and the parents then have to make comments, and they do. So you get this really beautiful interaction that's happening daily, multiple times a day, going backwards and forwards with the parents. And we're also able to kind of update any rewards that are given out, any issues that we might have, reading records and things. So it's just this really beautiful kind of platform for us to be able to feel like we're having those door conversations that you would usually have in a primary school, that aren't able to kind of happen at the moment.
Fantastic. Martin?
Yeah, things sort of that we did was that every day teachers sent out a Frog message, what we call blue messages. It's a text messaging service on Frog. So every child received that message each day as a check-in, and teachers posted on the class wall as well. And children were encouraged daily to contribute to a class timeline. And that was on top of activities and assignments that the children were set. We made sure as well that activities that the children had were things that they could do as families. And they weren't necessarily things where they had to have special equipment to do those activities. It was getting out into the garden, it was doing things outside, and activities that they could take part and talk as a family. And we feel it brought families closer together. There was a lot more discussion, there was a lot more family time together. And we saw a lot more pictures being posted on the timeline of children having family time together. One of the... Go on.
I know I was reading one of your blog posts, doing my kind of online stalking thing yesterday, and I think you talked about with the timeline and the use of the timeline that you saw children that were perhaps always, the loudest in the class, sort of engaging and being, sort of interacting and helping others online. And I wondered if you'd seen any sort of parallels with the sort of parent community as well. So perhaps parents that are sometimes quieter, engaging as well, whether there's any parallel that you could draw. Or
it's quite interesting actually, because we've just moved all of our parent meetings online this week, and we've probably had the greatest engagement that we've ever had, with the majority of parents all taking part in the online meetings. And that's quite an achievement really. It just shows how perhaps we've taken our parents on a journey with technology, and then feeling confident to take part in online meetings, and them feeling empowered to do that as well. And I think that's all part of the learning journey that they've gone on with their children as well, and the children helping parents to get online. The major drawback for us has been devices and families having to share devices because they've been working at home. Connectivity up here in Cumbria has not been great at times. Having down times when we've had everyone trying to get online for Joe Wicks and nobody been able to get online at the same time, and it all been dipping. But we've had ongoing support for families as well. So we've used our Facebook channels as well, so parents can message if they need support to help them online as well. And that has been good. At the start, support was very high, and it was going on till 8:30 at night. But as we moved through the process, we weren't getting very much help at all needed. So it was showing how people evolved as well in that.
So I suppose that brings me on to the big question. If I were to have one question for this session, it would be, how do you manage differing levels of parental engagement? So, you may have some parents that are super involved, want everything online, want to be engaged and interacting with everything, and others that perhaps are, even very difficult to connect with in the first place. And obviously there's kind of concerns around that. So just wondered what your experience were of the sort of spectrum of parental engagement, and how you manage that to sort of keep as many parents and students happy as possible.
I'll start. I think that's an extremely complicated answer to that question. So I'll just say a couple of things. Firstly, I think the one thing that you have to start off is by understanding is that all parents have different perceptions of what you should be doing for their children. So the first thing we've been trying to do it anyway prior to lockdown. It's not something we started. Is communicating what we are providing as a school and what they should expect and how they can support how we're trying to make their children amazing. So from that point of view, that's an ongoing thing. And I think once parents understand that more, that certainly greases the wheels of engagement, because they understand what they're doing. Our curriculum is based around skills and competencies with at least as much importance as the content of the subjects, and parents understand those. So we use things like reasoning and collaboration, so parents can talk about those kind of things with their children without thinking they don't know what they're talking about. So that engages a certain number of people, but then what we've done with those who are harder to reach is, I expect, what most people have done, which is during that time phoning home and that kind of thing, whereby we had interestingly, during lockdown, I think everyone spent a lot more time actually working, and so there was more time to spend on dedicated phone calls home and building relationships. But everything we did at the time was focused on long term. So we didn't do anything that was just throw away. Everything we planned to try and have as something that would then be able to be used now as we're going forwards. So reaching out to parents, building relationships that would last, and then having the resources, the support materials, and also the online videos telling them how to get to whatever it is they need to get to. And finally, having it on their phone. So we restructured everything so that it all works on their phone. We've rebuilt a dashboard, we've rebuilt everything so that pretty much the one thing that most people have is a phone.
That's interesting. I saw a comment in the chat, which is exactly the same point, that they almost kind of negate the desktop version and just promote the mobile version, so to increase engagement through that way. And to your point about sort of skills development and a broader curriculum in that sense, Graham's put here, Ofsted released a report today regarding children's social skills falling back. Has the panel experienced this with their students? So any comments on that before we move back to the differing levels of parental engagement?
Yeah, I can just something we've observed with our children. So as I say, they've all come in from very different backgrounds, but most of them were in kind of full lockdown from February. Things very, very strict kind of out here in Asia, and quite a few of our students have come from Hong Kong actually. So prior to COVID, we were also in a lot of a sticky situation with what was going in Hong Kong before. So have literally kind of not been out, not had any social engagement other than their parents and any siblings for a very long period of time. And then add that into the mix of going into a classroom with all new children, all new teachers, new building. We've had to do an awful lot of work with our children on we've dropped a lot of our other curriculum actually and really focused on the kind of PSHE aspects and community and social skills and kind of trying to put the devices away an awful lot in the classroom and really going back to some of the basics. So we've definitely found that the children have, I suppose, not gone backwards, but aren't as far forward as what we would expect them to be at this age because of the experience that they've had. And we've had to kind of alter what we do and what our curriculum is to take that into consideration.
Oh, thank you, Lewis. That's amazing to hear. Martin, any other points there?
Yeah, I think interacting in person, I think we have seen a fall back in that skill, definitely, and children are finding it hard knowing how to interact with each other, especially with the restrictions that we've got in primary at the moment and secondary probably as well. They're finding that quite difficult, how to communicate with each other and making friendships again. That's quite difficult. I think one of the good things was during lockdown was we saw children interacting in a different way and showing a lot more appreciation for each other through the use of timelines, etc., because they were really appreciative of each other's contributions and the way they interacted with the contributions the whole time during lockdown and the home learning on our timelines. We didn't want to see anybody using any put downs towards anybody's posts at all in the whole time. And that was lovely to see. That was really nice because you would expect to see some comments of some description somewhere along the line. But children, I think because they knew it was a safe environment and they knew that we were monitoring it as well and we were contributing as well, the whole community which they built up in their classes was a really nice environment. But back in class, the interaction children find that difficult in person, how to interact, how to communicate with each other. And we've spent a long time doing a lot of skills on social interaction in class.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone else wants to pop a question in the chat, I'll definitely pick those up. So I wanted to move on to a little bit about sort of structure or your parental engagement approach. I just wondered across the school, how important is consistency of parental engagement across the school? So class to class, and where is that usually set? Have you found where it works? set from a school leadership point of view? How have you gone about that within your own schools?
I can start. I think, echoing what Andy said, consistency for us is absolutely essential, and everyone's singing from the same song sheet and everything coming from the same platforms, the same messages to parents, so they all know what's expected. At the start of home learning, we sent out a information booklet on how to get onto everything. This is what we do, and sent out regular updates on how the platform works, how to communicate, how to get in touch with us, etc. So everyone knew what was happening, and all teachers were involved in training. We produced training videos for staff, training videos for parents and for pupils. So if there were any updates that Frog had pushed out, we then made a little video to show how that worked for the children, for the parents, for the staff at all levels. And I think we produced over 20 staff training videos over lockdown as well. Just each week there'd be a new update. This is how to do this, this is how to do that. And then sharing some of those with parents as well. So that's essential, I think.
And from April, have you each found that there's been more questions from parents than usual? Like, what types of questions are you getting? And have you found that kind of interest to make the school sort of a porous exchange between parents and the school is increased? Has that changed as well?
So we've, I hesitate to say we've been on a journey, but you know, we're all on a journey, aren't we? But so lockdown came during what we've been doing anyway. So all it enabled us to do was put our foot down and accelerate about 2 years worth of work into about 3 months. So so in order to answer your question, I don't think there were that many direct questions or requests for support, but evidently everybody went about running a school in their house in a different way, and it was up to us to, as Martin was saying, to try and support that as best as possible. I mean, definitely one of my hobbies during lockdown was making videos and sharing them with people, and then desperately trying to get them to watch what they were doing. So we made a lot of things like how to use whatever device you've got. So we made a site that basically, if you've got a phone, or you've got a really rubbish laptop, or you've got an iPad, or you've got a good laptop, what are the ways you can solve these problems? And so we reached out with that, and what we actually got back was a surprising amount of gratitude from parents. And I don't mean that parents aren't grateful, but they don't usually communicate it. So we had more positive things from parents who honestly, and I'm not just exaggerating this, were grateful that we learned as we went along. So we put out a letter that said, we're going to absolutely spam you with stuff for about 2 weeks whilst we get our heads around this, and then we'll sort it out. And as we went on, we got progressively better at it. And so I think that the way we worked with parents was communicating through written and video communication, and then responding to whatever they asked for. Bear in mind that most of the communication with students was done through the assignments in Frog. So students were able to ask for specific help about a specific thing. And we banned students from communicating with email. It was all done within the assignments in Frog. So it was very focused, and we could keep track on it. So one of the big problems, obviously, with lots of divergent communication pathways is that you can't tell if you've read everything that everybody's asked for. And there's nothing worse than a parent asking for help and you not getting to it because it went through your inbox before you had time to look at it.
And that's an important question, because I was going to come to that, is this idea of how do you manage to not duplicate the work for all of your teachers, for all the leaders, by, you know, you've got children in a lockdown or a shielding situation, you've got them in the classroom. How do you make sure that you're making it easier for everyone as opposed to duplicating it? But so for you, it was about one channel, you know, keep everything going through that.
I've written something down here this morning, and I used it with staff last week, and I keep saying to people, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. And I think at the minute, staff are really, people are feeling the pressure at the moment, and with more and more isolation happening and children going off for periods of time and us having to teach in class and deliver home learning as well, I think there's people can suddenly feel that they're having to produce teaching class and produce home learning at the same time, and that's a great pressure. And I think it's keeping it simple, and I think that's essential at the moment. Don't blow it out of proportion. Think, how can I deliver this in the simplest, best way for my children and maintain quality at the same time? And it's like keeping it simple and paring it back.
Absolutely. And Lois, I mean, you had the pretty challenging situation of, a new school coinciding with a global pandemic. So that's an interesting challenge that perhaps we didn't all anticipate. I'm expecting with your school and independent school as well, as with all schools, there's very high parental expectations and anticipation around students' progress, etc. So just wondered if you could share a little bit about what parents expected and how you delivered that over this year especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were quite lucky that most of our parents were, I suppose, signed up with us, if you like, quite early on. So we were able to do, I was out here for 9 months before the school opened, in a very lucky situation of not having to look after a school and just totally focused on opening. So we did an awful lot of work with our parents prior to us opening about what they could expect, and we obviously knew that we were having Frog come in, and I'd worked with it before, so I was able to explain to them what we would be using, what would be coming in different phases. We didn't open up everything that it's capable of doing straight away. So I think we did an awful lot of what Martin and John have been saying about videos and how to use things without actually having to kind of do it at that moment as well. So it was more kind of preparation for what was to come. I think the biggest thing for us has been obviously those expectations. We're academically selective as well, and so our parents are, they, as all parents do, they have very high expectations of their children. They're paying a large amount of money, and so I think for us, we've had absolutely no issues with parents wanting to be engaged with us. It's more about they're wanting more and more and more, and so it's kind of trying to manage what those expectations are so that our teachers are able to keep up with those expectations. And now they're teaching, also doing kind of these things constantly online with parents, and it's more about making sure they have what they need, but it's a manageable situation for us in school as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martin, I had a quick question for you as well. So Northlake School, I've got here, is a school with an inclusion quality mark, again, online talking, has worked to support parents of children with additional needs. So how have you gone about supporting that particular community of parents, and anything you can share with the audience today on that side of things?
Yeah, our Senko, with the strategic facility, they continue to have their timeline and posted pictures, but for a lot of the children within our strategic facility, they received their assignments as well, but they also received a weekly package, which was dropped off at their doors as well, because I think there was 7 children in that facility last year, so they received, because they needed a lot of physical things to manipulate and touch and use as well, so they would receive a package of resources, but they would then post pictures of what they were doing as well on the timeline and communicate in that way as well. So it was slightly different for those children. However, they were fully integrated into what we were doing online as well, and celebrating their achievements as well through our timelines, and they had their own class timeline as well.
Great, thank you. And I've got here, what were the most popular features or tools for parental engagement across each of the guests? So we've talked a lot about the feed. Were there any other areas of the platform that you're using that you found useful, and especially in terms of parental engagement?
I'll start on that. I just wrote down a couple of things that I thought would be useful to say, and one of them is the feedback app. So I think certainly when we sort of worked out what was going on in various schools around us, one of the things that we felt we were doing that was different was providing written and verbal feedback for students. I mean, we started off doing that very badly because everybody was, all hands to the pumps. But once we got the hang of it, where we've ended up now is that teachers can record verbal feedback, and students and parents can see that. And I think that's one of the things that stimulated the parental response, was that they were able to hear what we thought about their child's work. So it helped the child to motivate themselves to do more. But also, if the parent and the child can see and hear the feedback in one simple place, then it doesn't become a chore. So parents who are at home, either working from home, I mean, it was pretty chaotic. I had a child myself. My daughter was there. She was 7, and trying to teach her at the same time as everything else. So it made us very aware of what it was like to be a parent. So we've now put that feedback front and center, so that when a parent logs in, the first thing they can see is any new feedback they've had, that the child has had about work they've done. And that kind of relationship of doing work and it being appreciated and rewarded, I think was very powerful. And I actually spoke to Frog before we set off on this odyssey at the end of March, and we are really going to hit feedback hard, because that's going to make the children feel like they still have connection with their actual teacher, because there's nothing more significant than hearing your teacher's voice speaking to you about your specific work. So I think that's a very powerful element of it.
Yeah, that's always struck me as a bit of a no-brainer, even pre-COVID. So is that something you're going to carry on?
Absolutely. That's now part of our core strategy. So we're making it a manageable amount depending on what the department is. So you may set a piece of work that has deep feedback once every 2, 3, or even for some subjects that don't see the kids an awful lot, maybe once every half term. But the feedback they get is really worthwhile. And then obviously we go through the process of redrafting work and all that. But from the point of view of engaging a parent, that really was very much valued by parents.
Great. Any other features or tools you'd like to share?
One thing we did is we introduced something called the Froggies, and it was an award system for engagement. So we introduced a Frog of the Day. So each teacher nominated a child who they felt deserved to be the Frog of the Day in their class. And then each week we had bronze, silver, gold, platinum plus awards. So children earned their badge, and we shared those on our platform and on social media as well. And that helped with engagement, and the parents really enjoyed that, and were really keen to encourage the children to work towards one of those. And we made a specific site for that as well. So that was a really positive element of our journey, there's that word again, of our experience on home learning as well.
I suppose, Martin, that became a talking point for the kids, did it?
It did.
So
and we're about to introduce it again now. It's a lot more scaled down, but we're going to introduce it over the term as well, and keep the Froggies on the platform as well.
Are you going to call us out?
No, not at all. I've jumped on because Sophie is having some issues, so please continue.
Yeah, that's okay. So another thing that a huge change that we've made, because we use Frog Learn and we don't just have Frog Progress. So Frog Learn means that we can build websites. One of the things that a lot of people had to do very quickly was find an emergency online provider. And we've been using Frog for years, so we didn't have to go to Google Classrooms or whatever. We built our curriculum online. So everything that we want children to have access to, it wasn't quite there then, but more or less is now. So a parent can go on and find what a student should be doing, and we don't do that in a lesson by lesson way. So it's not prescriptive, it's lesson 38. It's more that the resources around the topic that you're doing are there. So if you're studying a book in English, there will be all kinds of interesting resources, some of them very focused on the book itself, and some on wider reading and such like. So what we did was we've created a sort of a sky's the limit resource. So if you're motivated and interested and engaged, students can find that work. They don't have to be prescribed it by us. We can prescribe it. It's all the same stuff. So we can assign it to students if we want to. We can guide them towards it using the progression charts and that. But also they're free to find it themselves. So really engaged students during lockdown, or students who became more engaged, were able to pursue their areas of interest more easily. So I think, yeah. I was going to just add one thing, that the other thing we did really badly to start with was we set assignments which had a lot of different things, and what we did was we've basically pared that all down. So we provide information in very small bite-sized chunks, and at the end of that, sort of, you might have 5 slides of information and then an activity at the end. And we've kept tasks down to about at most about half an hour, so that it's more empathetic for a child who's sitting there with a big load of stuff to do, and you're asking them to do something in the last 2 hours. For us, if you're going to ask a student to do something for an hour, you have to bear in mind that their computer might not work, and all those things that might go wrong. So our home learning strategy from this point forward is to provide targeted, well-designed and very accessible tasks surrounded by jumping off points, so things you can watch or read about if you want to go further.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. We did that as well. A lot of the tasks at the start had too much in them, and people were finding they couldn't open them because of their connectivity, because of their devices. And we learned the hard way to begin with, and we had to pare it right back, as John was saying.
So just as I'm looking at the giant clock, we've got a few minutes, and if Lucy, if you'd like me to carry on a bit, I'm happy to do that as well. Well, on a sort of larger level, obviously we had all the disruption with the exams this year, and I was just wondering whether there's any, people sort of minded to using something like Frog to track that progress. To if we're in the situation again where there's exam disruption, whether that allows some kind of continuity around assessments as well, and whether that's a factor, and whether that's something that parents are interested in as well. So not something, I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head there, whether that's any benefit as well.
Well, can I come back on that in terms of Frog quizzes? So one of the things that you have in Frog is the ability to write quizzes, and what we learned was that we were able to, and it's very important to know that we're not at the end of this bit. So this is not definitive. This is where we are now. So we're learning to write much shorter quizzes that are focused on much higher quality responses. So to reduce marking workload, instead of asking a child to write a 100-word, 200, 300-word answer to a question, we might present them with 3 answers and a mark scheme and ask them to mark them, or 3 answers and say which one is the best answer to this question, and give me 5 reasons. So flipping the work so that it's focused differently. So in terms of our exam preparation, that means that we can focus students on exam technique using Frog quizzes. And I am absolutely not saying we've got that sorted, but a change in focus in the way we ask those questions means instead of having 20 questions, you might have 5, and we're much more able to cope with that and feeding back to students about those things. So that is definitely a tool that we are using more, and wrapping that up with obviously spending time, for want of a better word, teaching the kids how to learn online.
Yes, so there's an added advantage of actually making them sort of digitally literate and that kind of thing as well.
I think it's very important. One of the things that we've noticed this year was that the year 6 is joining us in year 7, because they missed the end of school. They didn't really transition out of primary school properly, so they've come to us very much like primary school children. And you don't want to kill that off. You want to keep that going, because the longer you maintain that enthusiasm and vigor, the better. But it does mean that they run around and chase each other at lunchtime. So we are looking at, like I said right at the beginning, we're looking at kind of joining the experience of the parent and the child together as they learn to do this, so that we are definitely in a strong position if we have to do the full lockdown again. So our resources are all in place, and our mechanism for getting the work out and understood and back should be clear. It isn't perfect. I mean, if we were locked down tomorrow, we'd be really close to being there, but we wouldn't be there. I suppose it's always going to be improving.
Fantastic. Well, I know we're currently at time, so perhaps it's going to be Lucy jumping in. Let me just see.
I'm here. I think your feed keeps freezing a little bit, Sophie. Yep, you've definitely frozen on screen. So in that case, I will thank everybody. So Sophie, thank you so much for chairing this panel. Thank you for those challenging questions. It's been absolutely fantastic. I think you're kind of back and kind of going. But I think the main things that came out of that were particularly around the use of e-portfolios, communicating with parents, involving them in their students' journey, hearing their teacher's voice, supporting parents as teachers in some case, and also keeping it simple and being prepared. And it's really interesting to hear how you've all dealt with that. So thank you to Sophie, thank you Martin, thank you very much Lois for joining us this morning. We are very shortly, we are now going to head to a very, very short break, and then straight after that, Graham from our technical team and George Bligh from Greenshaw High School are going to give us a little bit of a walkthrough of the kind of ideas that they've got around preparing your digital platform to share that, to share those journeys for good parental engagement. And again, that will mirror some of the simplicity that's been having. So I'm going to ask Graham to pop up a screen just to give everybody 5 minutes. I'm going to take myself off camera. I'll see you very, very shortly. And Simon, I've just seen your message. Yes, it's all being recorded and we will share the videos as soon as they're ready after today with you all. And obviously some links to hear about some other school stories. So thank you very much and we will see you very soon. Hello everyone, welcome back. So we just needed a quick break to sort out some of the tech. So this last session, I'm going to hand over to Graham Quince, who is our solutions architect. So hi Graham.
Hi. So we're just inviting, it looks like George is just about to join us on stage too. Hi George.
Hi everyone, morning.
So what we wanted to do with you for this section is I've obviously been working with a number of our frog schools and we don't really want to give you a product tour. What we want to do is show you one of our schools, Greenshaw High in Sutton, who've been doing a huge amount of work and a huge amount of thinking, just like the other schools we've heard from today. But it's that thinking that we want to capture. Now, a couple of times in this, we'll be showing you a few of the features of Frog, but it's really just about that's how we've facilitated everything. But as I say, it's more about that thinking. George has done an awful lot of that thinking and worked with his senior team around that. So George is perfectly placed to take us through that. There's been a couple of things that's also been mentioned specifically, and I'm thinking of feedback, and we'll show you a bit of that too, just so you understand what that product is or that product element is that we're referring to. But George, if you'd like to share your screen and we can get started.
Yes, of course. Let me share that screen there with you all. There we go. Okay, so yeah, what we're seeing here is, as Graham said, we'll take you through some of the sort of key functions of our sort of parental engagement platform, really. So what you're seeing here on the screen is what a parent would see when they log into Frog for the first time. And it's their kind of main dashboard. I did mention earlier in the chat actually about we actually promote the Frog app and the phone experience a lot more than the desktop version. Just as other speakers said earlier, you know, the main engagement for parents these days is normally their phone screen. So that's why we've gone for kind of a, as you can see on the screen, very much a layout based on apps, really. So we have, like, you try to mirror that basically for a parent.
And the thing that struck me the first time I saw the parent dashboard is just how Spartan it is. You've got so very few links, but I'm guessing that's been a deliberate choice.
Yeah, that's right. So in the past, we've had to roll out other systems to parents, and they can be quite overwhelming. You know, we've got such a wide range of ability. Like people said earlier on, I think it might be Martin that said that you got to really train the parents really to do all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it looks quite sparse, but that is intentional.
So I'd really like to dive in. Earlier on, it was mentioned by Andy Davison about My Child. But before we do that, I'd just like to dive into some of the simpler functions, if we can. And I'm saying that because I know. But I see that you've got an Update My Details one on the parent dashboard. Could you just show us what that looks like?
Yeah, so that was something that was kind of a bit of a brainchild of our main school office, actually. So they were getting, probably at the start of the year, normally around this kind of time, in September time, they get a lot of calls from parents or emails around, I've got a new mobile number, or I've got a new email address, we've moved house, that kind of stuff. And that stuff can get lost in translation, because normally what would happen is you'd get a phone call from a parent, put on a post-it note, oh, Mr. Bloggs has got a new phone number, and it might just sit there for a week. Whereas this system now allows the parents to go onto the dashboard, click on update their details, fill the short form in. As soon as they hit submit, it goes to the office team for them to action. So it's kind of been the one place you do that. And if they do get calls saying, oh, I've got a new phone number, we obviously try and encourage them to go to this page.
But it just means that you're not having to read anybody's handwriting. You're not having to pick up any notes. You're streamlining the process. And ideally, if a parent has come up with a ridiculously new email address, then at least you're not having to work out exactly what's a letter and what's a number in it. You can just copy and paste it. I think on the similar vein, I'm guessing then that letters is also about streamlining.
Yeah, that's right. So letters is, again, a really basic page, but it gives us the opportunity to create a bit of a letters bank for our parents. So, you know, when we could do things, when we can go on trips, when we could do events inside school, traditionally you send a letter out, you know, the usual kind of tear the form off, fill it out kind of thing. It never works, because if you send it home with the child, never gets home. And if you email it, it gets lost in parents' inboxes. So this is an area where we would put all of our school letters organised by year group. And that's just a much more proficient way of firstly getting the letters out there, but secondly managing an archive of them too.
So it's not just, that's interesting, because I remember being told off for leaving school letters at the bottom of my school bag. Yeah. But you're actually using this as the primary communication now to say there's a letter on the parent portal. Yeah,
that's right. So we would still communicate to parents and say, you know, this trip is happening, for example. You'll find the letter on this section of Frog. So it gets them into the platform.
So if nothing else, and again, not the focus, but you're thinking around this, you must be saving an awful lot in printing and letter and staff time preparing and folding letters.
Time is the biggest thing. Like, obviously, to claim back money and to keep that is fantastic, but to save some office staff having to sit there and stuff envelopes and print out tutor group lists and things like that, it just saves a hell of a lot of time for them.
Yeah, which is, you know, something that's always going to be a priority no matter what's happening. Now, as I say, right at the start of the webinar, Andy was mentioning about how the My Child feature had been released in the Earhart release. And I know that it's so new for schools, especially this year, that a lot of them haven't seen it yet. So could we just have a quick look at your My Child, please?
Yeah, so My Child has been really powerful for us. So I'm logged in here as a dummy student for GDPR reasons, but I have got a few screenshots here of an actual child and parent account. So here's how it would look regularly to a parent logging in. So the assignment calendar, I think we're going to come back to shortly to have a look at some of those assignments, but that's quite key for all year groups. Going forward, things, even basic things like having the timetable in there for parents. This traditionally works really well for our sixth form families. So if you've got a year 13 student who claims they've got a free period and they've turned up at 10 o'clock back at home, you can go, well, no, you haven't actually, you've got English now, why are you here? So that's quite nice. And that also leads on to this bit as well, is around the attendance stuff too. So again, really, really nice for all year groups to see that, but we've had a lot of feedback from our A-level students, families around, they can actually see subject by subject attendance as well, which is really nice.
Now that's interesting, because we've, you know, in the panel discussion we had two younger year schools in, both talking about sort of the need for constructing or structuring their child's day, but actually you're finding that you need to have just as much focus at the sixth form level.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, we spoke about this before, Graham, me and you, but I think sixth form is our biggest eyes on screen numbers for the whole Frog platform. They're so independent as students, but they do need something like this for their parent, just to have that little kind of overview of what's actually going on inside school. So yeah, the attendance stuff here for our sixth form families has been really, really powerful.
But now the other aspect of what I'm seeing and sort of what we wanted to demonstrate, and certainly when George first showed me his parent portal, is the fact that This is what parents are seeing. So when they're logging in, not only do they have the convenience of the updating details and letters, but they've got all their child's homework calendar all in one place. Their registration, I can see that they've got documents connected to the Sims linked documents connected to their MIS. So again, it's providing that one-stop shop that you've done, so that parents aren't having to log into multiple different places, which again I think came up from what John was saying in the panel discussion about how he wanted to make sure all their communication was via one platform, in their case Frog.
Yeah, that's right. So the documents is a really good example, because there's no other way in our school to get a child's report unless you go onto your Frog parent account. There's no other way of doing it. Parents might email and say, "Oh, I just can't log in. Can you send it to me?" I'm going to be quite reluctant to do that and just say, actually, no, in a nice way. Here's how you get into your account. Provide some support over the phone, videos on the website to train them through it. But actually, I'd say once they've done it once, they go, "Oh, actually, this is quite easy." And again, with the app, parents love the app because you log into it once and that's it. So when we look at the analytics of the platform, we do see now that the majority of parents are accessing things like reports through their phone rather than through an actual laptop or a PC.
That's interesting. So again, it's about that convenience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we just jump back to probably just the real assignment calendar, if you don't mind? But again, I remember, and we published a story from you, and I'll post it in the link after this chat, about how you using the assignment calendar during lockdown that the UK was under for structuring the school day. But then looks like you're continuing to do that to an extent.
Yep. So the students also obviously get their calendar as well, but we use our the assignment calendar here to structure the whole of the week's homework. So I'll just bring up a homework schedule for us here. This is our homework schedule for the whole school. So we managed to implement, not just because of lockdown, we're doing this for a couple of years now. We've had this homework schedule centralised for the whole school across the whole week. Obviously they get Fridays off, but Monday to Thursday, all the year groups participate in very similar homework. It might look like a lot, but if you look, for example, here, year 7 and 8 on a Monday, there's quite a lot of tasks here, but if you look, they're only 15 or 10 minutes, and there's just over an hour each night of homework. The big one here is CKS, which I'll come back to shortly, so I've got a live example of that. But one of the main things, again, it's been a bit of a point today across all the different talks, is that we use all of these platforms here, but the students can't get to them platforms or even know what tasks they're meant to do in Hegarty Maths, for example, unless they go through Frog first. So we assign the tasks for Hegarty Maths inside Frog, and we just put a direct link for them to then log into it.
And I think that's a really important message, and it's a message that you helped us structure, actually, George, from years ago. And if you go into our homework course on the community, you'll find that we repeat this message. By having one place for the homework to go into, children and parents know exactly what they have to do, but at no point is Frog or restricting teachers to one system. And I can see here you're using IXL English and Tassamai and so on, and that's planned in. So you're giving each teacher and each subject their flexibility, but you're making sure that the children only have one place to go.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So these platforms here, like Hegarty Maths and Tassamai is for science, and they do that extremely well because all they do is focus on the science curriculum, and we wouldn't ever not want to use it. However, we can't just give a load of links to the kids and go, good luck. We just use Frog as that one place for everything.
Now, I'm just keeping an eye on the questions that are coming in on the side. If we could just jump back momentarily to your Frog, if that's okay, just to make sure that we've answered those questions. There was one from Sue Busher about yes, there are rules and sharing, and I am working on something, Sue, so I might be able to show you that. But Sue was also asking about registration and attendance detail. Well, that's pulled in, depending on the MIS system you use, we can pull in different information. And Sims is the one that gives us the most information. So we can, with Frog Parent as an add-on, we can pull in that information and display it. A few people have had their eye caught by your crystal menu, and this is a custom theme that Greenshaw commissioned from Frog's designers. So it is entirely possible to make your platform look exactly like you want it to look, but if you were, and you can build it yourself, but I think in George's case, they went to our design team for that.
Yeah.
But that was just to sort of make sure I was answering the questions. Interestingly, we've got a few comments as well. Other people are doing exactly the same as you and having that homework structure and giving everyone that flexibility.
Yeah, that's great. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Could we now switch over to the teacher view? So we can see what it looks like for teachers, because one of the big challenges I think that especially the UK schools are facing right now, but I'm sure it's a worldwide issue, is that teachers are having to make sure they're still teaching in the classroom, get their class through that work, but also they've got to prepare work for the children who are self-isolating. And I know George has been doing some thinking around that. So yes, if we could start having a look at that side of it, please, George.
Yeah, that's right. So we've been quite lucky where we are. So we're based in Sutton, which is actually, if you look at the list of London boroughs, we're pretty much at the bottom of COVID cases, which is fantastic. So we've actually not had whole year groups off, or we've not had to send home lots of students. At the moment, we have about 34 students isolating across the whole school. So that's 34 out of 1,800 students that have to isolate. So it's actually quite positive. However, we do have to provide, obviously, that work for them. So if I go into this section here, if I go into teaching and learning and go to isolation, what you're going to see here is one for each year. So as a teacher, it's my responsibility to load on some work for the students in my classes that might be isolating. So I go into the year 10 one, for example. The students will get a basic timetable on the front page. Obviously, they haven't got to follow it, but it's just nice to give them some guidance. And then at the top there, we've got the subjects. The first button here, the second button, is upload resources. Only staff can see this. So if I go into this section here, it means that I can, as a teacher, go on, find my subject and upload my resources into that area. It's really easy to do, really, really basic. That then obviously pulls through into a subject page. So something like food, for example. Here's really, really simple. Lessons on the left, resources on the right-hand side. So it's really, really easy for the students. They literally read it here and they go, right, read the carbohydrates PowerPoint, make notes and answer questions. They just find it over here and read through it. So it's not that interactive, but at the moment it hasn't actually got to be, because we can't afford to plough a load of time into this section of Frog for 34 kids. But obviously if we do go onto rota systems and closing down bubbles, it's going to be a lot more interactive and a bit more like our kind of lockdown lessons.
But what you've done is you've made it so that the classroom teacher has a facility to get this out. The children who are self-isolating, I take it you're showing them this process to go through.
Yeah.
And then, yes, teachers who are, it's hard to imagine many professions that are as busy as teachers are right now. And obviously, healthcare workers aside, but you're providing a simple route for them to get through that and clear directions for the students as well.
Yeah, that's right. So when the students, if they tell us they need to isolate or we tell them they have to isolate, they will receive a phone call from their year team, who will then talk them through this page here. So not all students can see this area. The year team adds them into a special group on Frog that then makes this content appear for them. So it is only visible for them students. But yeah, we do give them a bit of a hand-holding session. Most kids just go, oh yeah, it's fine, I know how to use it already, which is great. But others need a bit more help.
That's great. Now, the next thing that we plan to show you, and George and I had to have a bit of a brainstorm about this, is it had already been referred to several times, the feedback system, but we can't show you George's feedback tool within his assignments because of GDPR. That would show you student names and their class arrangements. So we had a bit of a brainstorm, and what I've done is I'm just going to start moving my screen over, is I've set up a whole list of dummy students and dummy assignments, and we'll make that large, and hopefully you can see that there. So this is I'm logged in as a teacher on our platform, and I've got all my assignments here. I've actually got them organized into classes as well, so I can see the assignments there. But there's been a lot of mentions of feedback today, so we prepared something here as well. And I'd set my homework and I'd ask the students to hand in. In this case, they had to, I can go into it and show you, but in this case, they had to prepare a London Underground style map of their hometown with a couple of transport links, and there was things that they had to do to make sure that they completed. So when I close that down, I can go into Abby, and I can see that Abby has actually taken a photo of her work. Actually, this was a digital one. She's digitally prepared a feedback, and I can click on it and open it here. Now, what this does is it will take Word documents and PowerPoints and convert them into images, but it will also take images, obviously, and I can, as a teacher, I can go in and I can start leaving comments and stickers, which is a simple case of I can just drag this in there. And you can see I've even got the ability to add audio recordings in here too, making it really quite simple. I think possibly the most useful bit, if there was one, is, you know, this is meant to be a tube map, so this should have been a square line. And I can do that, and I can annotate Abby's work, and she can see that back. So that was how we have always imagined feedback working, taking a digital document and being able to mark it online. But if I just cancel that for now, then our schools started showing us the other way of doing this. And I think this is the one that's been referred to more, where students are preparing work in their exercise books, taking a photo of it and handing it in digitally. So the teachers are still able to do that marking of physical work, but with that whole digital air gap from the students' workbooks. So we've spoken to a few schools who have gone through all sorts of hoops of having to collect in the workbooks from children and put them in a drawer for 2 days and then get them out and mark them, and then they go back in to create that gap, to create that COVID bubble, if you like, a COVID secure environment. But instead I can go onto this photo and I can just start. I've already left a label there, actually. This student didn't label her axes here, but I can go on and I can just tick where appropriate. I can leave comments where appropriate. And because the students are, again, doing this via their devices, we've got an app that allows you to take photos and send them straight into their assignments. It's a really quick and simple way to make sure that the children are doing all this work and getting it marked, rather than it just being one of these one-way systems where you're pushing out work to the students to keep them busy. So we just wanted to make sure that we covered that and showed you that. But George, while I was preparing this with George, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask George to share his again, is George then showed me the next thing that he's been working on. And it's not really got that much to do with parental engagement. And it's not, George, this is obviously the independent study area. And it's just so cool. It's so impressive that I wanted to share it with you. And George has very kindly agreed to sort of talk us through this. And it's all, again, it's another thing that, yes, Frog makes work, but it could be done anywhere. This isn't about it being all about selling you Frog. This is about just showing you the thinking that the school's been doing around it.
Yeah, so this is our independent study area here. So this is a bit of a brainchild of one of our assistant head teachers and myself. We sort of thought, what can we do to really bridge the gap for our current year 11 students who lost out a hell of a lot of GCSE teaching last year. So the plan is to create an independent study area for every single core subject and then option subject too. This is how one would end up looking. So we've focused our efforts on English for now, just as an example. So we took it to SLT and they said, yeah, plow along ahead with it really. As a student, I can log on to this section here, click on English, and I can see all of my topics here. So I've got Inspector Calls, Macbeth and Jekyll and Hyde. There's also poetry to add in there too. So if I think, actually, I need to focus on the main characters in Inspector Calls, for example, I can then choose in the subtopics here, the main characters section. Before I go into that and show you it, there is a knowledge checker on the front page here. So I can see there's one of these for every single subtopic of an Inspector Calls, and I can tick off here on the list that actually the 3 review cycles for each part of knowledge. I can say, actually, I'm really comfortable learning about Mrs. Burling, Sheila, and the inspector, for example. And I can add some notes in here about what I need to follow up on. But I can use that as a student to keep a log of what I know and what I need to work on. If I go into the main characters section here, here is a page for every single main character in Inspector Calls. So Mr. Burling here, for example, they'll follow exactly the same structure for all the different subjects. So there's the first thing is a video, and this is about a 6-minute video by one of our teachers. So they've just recorded themselves talking about that character as they would in a lesson, and that's gone on there. Then we've got 2 sets of flashcards for the students. So again, we've built this to work nicely on the phone, so it actually feels like an actual flashcard. So you've got the recall flashcards, which are very much kind of question answer. So for example, how is Bligh described in the initial stage directions? There's the answer, and you can flick through those and go through the flashcards. And the extend questions are more kind of big thinking questions. So what's and whys really. So those are there for the students to look at. We've also then got a quiz for each of those sets of flashcards. Again, that helps the student go over it again, but even better for us is we can also monitor who's done them quizzes and what scores they're getting too. So there's a quiz for each set of flashcards. They can also then upload a picture of the written notes. So the idea is when they watch the video, they actually make something called Cornell notes, which is just a way of dividing the page up. They'll upload a photo of their actual notes they've written in their book. And the last one is the apply section. So this is kind of more of an extended answer question. So the student gets the question here, and they can then write their answer in the box and save that. They can also come back to that at any time if they want to as well, to actually edit that question too. So that's kind of one example there of how it's going to look for the rest of the subjects, but we're getting there with English just as our starting point really.
And I think that's really interesting and great to see. And what strikes me is it's sort of the culmination of the journey you've been working through, where you start with your homework calendar, telling the year 7s what they're going to get every day, or telling their parents just as much what they're going to get every day. Then you're providing them with the places to go for the self-isolation, and you're encouraging that independence from an early age. And this will then take them through to a really powerful independent study resource. And George, I just think that what you've been sharing with us is amazing, and thank you very much for doing so.
No, it's a pleasure. I also I spoke to one of our deputy heads last night who's running the project, and he said that he's obviously happy for any other schools that want to either work with us on this or actually want to get involved in it somehow. Just let us know, and we can always work together on it too.
Well, that's great. And I can see Lucy has joined us in the bottom corner. So I'm going to thank you again, George. If anybody has seen anything technical, then you can drop me a line. But I'll hand over to Lucy to sum up. But thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, George, so much. That's again, you've been mirroring everything that everybody has been saying for the last hour and a half today, which is about keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, getting a baseline of the technical ability of all of your stakeholders, and delivering something that is accessible. And I think the simplicity of your approach, it looks very simple, but underneath all of that very simple interface, there's so much going on there to engage students, to engage parents, and to make life easier for teachers. And I'm sure your teachers there very much appreciate what you've put in place for them to help them deliver to do their job in such difficult circumstances. So thank you for joining us. Thank you both.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye. So that's the end of our webinar today. We will be sending out copies of this. If you go onto the Frog Education website, there is a link to the Real World Learning series where you can see some more stories from other schools out there. And there's also a white paper that has been published based on the previous Frog 20, which again highlights and has links to lots of other stories from around the world from our schools, and from not just Frog schools, but from many schools. So thank you again for taking the time out, and thank you all again for the hard work that you have been doing in teaching our kids and keeping things going in these difficult times. So there will be a few folk that are staying around just on the chat for a little bit longer if you have any further questions. But in the meantime, thank you very much, and bye.